You're listening to Pardon the Disruption with your host, Tom Young.
Hey, everybody. Hey, this is Tom Young. Let's go around the room.
This is Bart Gallo.
This is TJ Young.
And this is Rohan Kapoor.
Great, guys. Hey, thanks for joining us today. We're going to have a conversation about a topic called swarm AI, or swarm artificial intelligence, which is the protocols behind things like, you've heard the term hive mind, which has a very negative connotation in science fiction. But swarm AI is a interesting way of organizing complex systems with AI. It's just a different way of looking at things. And so I want to talk a little bit about that, break it down, show a couple of examples. We got exposed to this over the weekend when we were looking at the impact of things like sports betting and the ability to predict outcomes of complex systems. So what I found interesting about reading about swarm AI was the researchers are trying to glean examples from nature. So if you think of a ant colony, the ant colony, you think of an ant as the life form, but if you raise your perspective and say the colony is the life form, the ant just becomes a tool within that life form. And how do they know what to do? Is there a leader in the ant colony? How do the ants that are out there organize themselves? How do they know how to do things? Same with termites. In termite colonies, they build these big termite things in Africa. Some of them are like 15 meters tall or 10 meters tall. You look at fish, schools of fish, swarms of birds. So there's lots of examples in nature where you have these self-organizing complex systems that are performing different things without leaders. So it challenges our nature of what is the life form. Is it the individual fish in the school, or is it the school? Is it a termite or the termite colony? And what we're trying to understand is the software or the algorithms behind that sort of change this. So anyway, what are you guys' thoughts on this? You guys, we have all talked about this a little bit prior to this recording. What do you guys think about this topic?
Yeah, I think it's super interesting. I think the applications that we've seen are quite exciting. Just from, we do the occasional sports betting now that it's legal in New Jersey. And some of the examples that we'll talk through where they actually are able to predict things like Kentucky Derby, the Oscars, stuff like that, I think is really showing where just scratching the surface of some of the applications. And also to some extent, I think a lot of people talk about how AI in general is technology, is meant to augment humans. But this is one real application where I think that's definitely true.
This is how I really tripped on the topic, right? Because New Jersey legalized sports betting this year, in the last 12 months.
Yeah.
So I started doing it around the Super Bowl, and I was just fascinated by the business side of it. And there's a movie called Moneyball, and a book written about baseball starting to use information to make decisions. And one of the premises we have in our general consulting business is fact-based decisions generally are better decisions than gut decisions. And then I stepped back and said, well, gut decisions aren't always bad. So how do I bring all that together? And I started thinking about that relative to making decisions in sports around what they did in Moneyball, using a lot of data to make decisions about which players to pick, et cetera. And Billy Beane, who drove that, had a lot of success in baseball, and then it made a great movie about that. But then you take it into the sports, about the ability to predict outcomes in sporting events is the nature of sports betting. And then we tripped upon this TED Talk, and I'm going to play this first video clip, as the CEO from a company called Unanimous AI, where last year they predicted the first 4 positions in the Kentucky Derby at an odds of 550 or so to 1, and hit that, and that got them a lot of notoriety. But then they also did some things, and we're going to show this next clip, around their prediction of the Oscars and how they fared against the experts, but more importantly, how they're leveraging just what we'll call movie enthusiasts versus experts, and collectively organizing their enthusiasm and knowledge and organizing it under a swarm protocol to get a superior outcome. It's not voting. It's not 20 people vote and you take the vote, because they show that doesn't yield the best results. This is a very different, and rather than get into the black box of what swarm AI does, it does exist. It is a different way of doing it. So let's show this first clip on the Oscars and how they predicted this, and then let's talk about some other ways that this can be applied in business.
Last year, Newsweek challenged us to predict the Oscars. So we formed a swarm of 50 movie fans, not experts, just regular fans, and we had them think together as a system to predict each of the categories. So here's the swarm predicting Best Actress, and you can see them pushing and pulling on the system, moderated by our AI algorithms and converging on Brie Larson. And we did the same thing for each of the different categories, and then Newsweek published our predictions, which put some pressure on us. So how do we do? Let's compare the individuals to the swarm. So those 50 movie fans, as individuals, were 40% accurate. That's not great, but predicting the Oscars is hard. By taking a vote, those 50 movie fans were 47% accurate, which is a little bit better. But by thinking together as a swarm, they jumped all the way up to 76% accurate. That's almost double the accuracy of the individual members. And what's even more amazing is we can compare to the average professional movie critic, which was 64%. In other words, by thinking together as a swarm, these average movie fans became an artificial super expert that was able to beat the New York Times, the LA Times, Rolling Stone, Variety.
So that clip shows how you're able to take and organize largely through a neural network. So if you think of each individual as a neuron in a neural network, or a layer in an artificial neural network, organizing them in such a way where we leverage the relative intelligence. So instead of a one man, one vote, or one person, one vote, the relevant intelligence and confidence of the intelligence of the specific thing is applied and weighted appropriately so that you come out with an outcome that is a sort of the group intelligence versus just a pure vote. And in this case, it went from 40 to 47 on classic democratic voting. But the swarm protocols took it to 76, which is superior than the experts. And this is a simple example. And you start to think, okay, if I could start to do that, how can I tap into basically the swarm knowledge or the swarm AI from large groups to make better decisions around everything from customer experience to what's going to happen next with my product and services, to sports betting, which was, we said, how do I predict who's going to win the next baseball game?
Especially around measurements that are not binary, or something that we can measure today that it's like it's this or that, whereas this is looking at really like dynamic, real time, like micro sentiments among the population and how it's shifting. And it's not just saying, hey, we're all going to answer this question, to your point, but it's saying how is the fluctuations of these different sentiments towards a different actress, to a movie, towards the money line on the NCAA game last night, how that's all shifting, and how can you draw patterns from that. And I think part of when we get more into the swarm intelligence discussion from a biology standpoint, there's a whole idea of emergence, right? There's a lot of backwards engineering in terms of analyzing these swarms of organisms, whether it's an ant colony or a flock of birds, where we can see the behavior, we see the macro behavior, and we have to kind of backwards engineer based on that emergent behavior, what is the math that's there because of evolution or whatever happened to cause that emergent behavior, right? So do we work backwards from the emergent behavior, or do we use tools like machine learning or AI to experiment in very fast iterations, different equations, so that we can cause different sets of emergent behavior to happen based on the initial inputs? Well, it's very interesting.
So they got this from biology, right? So they looked at like bee colonies, where they have to figure out how to relocate the hive. So it is an existential question for the colony. They got to get it right. And you can go into and read the reports and watch some of the videos where they get into the details. But the bees make fantastic decisions about the location of their next hive. better than humans make. And you say, how do they do that? Because they don't have individually, each bee does not have the intelligence. It's like
183,000th of a human brain or something.
So in terms of this number of neurons in your brain, they're like, it's like 85,000, 1/85,000th of a person.
Yeah.
So 85,000 bees, if you added them all up, would be in the same amount of neurons together, but they don't work together. So the issue is, how do they work together? They don't talk, they don't communicate, they don't have walkie-talkies.
Well, they kind of do in some
But they
ways
get
through
this goal. They get
vibrations.
this one goal right, and you're trying to say, how do they do that? And this is where we struggle to wrap our heads around. So this is when we talked about this over the last couple of days. We were coming saying, well, what's the rules? How do they do this? And we have a clip coming up where this woman in one of the TED Talks talks about it's called Taming the Swarm. And this woman, Radhika Nagpal, gives at the TED Talk in Bermuda. It's a couple years ago now, but she gives a talk about how you program the rules to do this. They're not going to get into specifically what the rules are. We'll do that in the next clip. But this clip lays out a little bit about how that drives an output, about building a program. Let's go do this.
So the next step is, what are the rules? How do you get a bunch of these robots to actually cooperate? And one of the things we discovered was that we can actually design our own rules. So if you gave me a picture of a structure that you wanted, there is actually a way to systematically come up with rules that all of the robots, if they ran together, would produce the structure. And the interesting thing about these rules is that they can use the same ideas that I was telling you with the termites. So each individual robot comes to the structure, and it actually just looks for building patterns. It's looking for somewhere to build, and it has to find somewhere to build, but it doesn't really know how many other robots they are or where the other ones are. They're just constantly reacting to things built by other individuals in their colony.
Okay, so in that clip, you see how they basically set the rules. And rather than get into the details of the rules, they set these rules based on a blueprint of what the objective is. The objective in this case was to build something. And you can see how the organisms, in this case the robots or the termites or whatever term you want to use, they don't necessarily have the full blueprint. They have their individual rules on how they react to the environment that they see. And because there's so many of them in these large colonies, it's relentless.
And the point at the end, it's so simplistic that each individual does not even have a recent memory of what they just did. They're reacting in real time with those basic rules.
Yeah, so what they're doing is they're looking for
Patterns.
Opportunities to improve on the existing environment locally.
Mm-hmm.
Locally. So they don't see the whole thing. They have something and say, oh, I can improve it locally, and I do it right here. And then the aggregation of all of those decisions create the superstructure based on the programming that's put in place.
Right. I guess this might go a little off topic, and I don't know if we can answer this, but we're doing this, a lot, very inspired by biology in some cases, and we're trying to mirror this in robotics and software as well. Is there an improvement to a system like this where we have the benefits of the swarm, but the individuals are aware of the macroscopic effects of their actions? So you think about, we were talking before the podcast started around self-driving cars, right? So we've all seen iRobot, Will Smith,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
All differing opinions about the movie. I think it's a guilty pleasure of mine,
Yeah.
at least.
It's fun.
But the ideas in it I like a lot, especially just the ideas of the world in the future. They showed the highway system and cars, they're all running on those spherical wheels so they can kind of go in any direction.
Yeah, yeah.
And the highway scenes are flying by like 200 miles an hour. Everyone's just hanging out. They don't really care. But there's no traffic lights because all the cars are aware of each other and their relative position, which means that there's no traffic lights. They can just fly through each other perfectly without any concern around crashing into one another or having a traffic jam. Whereas I'm a human, I can see this guy's texting or I know this guy's braking in front of me. It's a very localized view of traffic. And I think in that way, the way that traffic exists today in terms of behavior very much mimics an ant colony. If you zoomed up maybe 30,000 feet in the air and sped up the time, the way that traffic moves and highways move, it's very similar to how ants might move. I mean, there's maybe fewer traffic jams because they can move in different ways, but Imagine a system where you have those benefits from the swarm, but each individual is aware.
It's the ecosystem awareness.
Yeah, it's almost like, is there a way to capitalize on those benefits while also having that, I don't know if you larger artificial intelligence engine, that kind of like that governance engine above it all? Can they not coexist? Does that diminish the whole point of the swarm in the first place?
Well, I think that's when you start to bridge the gap between early swarm AI and then at least narrow or strong AI, at least in the sense of autonomous vehicles in that example.
Right.
That system of the roads that are aware of the vehicles and the vehicles that are aware of the entire system of the roads they're driving on is a relatively strong AI.
Right.
In that field.
And I think the short-term deployments of self-driving cars, especially if we don't have the infrastructure right, will be this form of swarm intelligence where the Tesla car, the Google car, it's reacting to things in the environment. Pedestrian walks in, stop. Car in front of me is braking. Adaptive cruise, I'm going to brake as well.
But also there's
that's
an
the first
accident.
iteration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What is the iRobot iteration of that? And then in other applications beyond cars.
Yeah, I think that the potential here is, we don't have to like limit ourselves just to deploying a swarm AI protocol. You could further inform that by changing the coefficients that are driving it with machine learning and higher orders of stuff to create even things way beyond what we're contemplating here. This is just another tool in the kit of AI that will drive things. And so I just found it fascinating because we were trying to understand, how to, where does this stand right now and how is it driving? Because when I looked at it, as soon as I started to distill it back, it felt a lot like these were de facto artificial neural networks in nature, right?
Yeah.
That the node in an artificial network by itself is not that smart. The compilation of the nodes in the artificial neural network became super smart. And when we look at an artificial neural network in a computer system, we don't understand exactly how it works in an if that then this kind of construct. And it's the same thing is true here. Why did that ant take this one thing from over here all the way over and put it there? Well, the answer is that we learned they probably don't. They're just acting locally, and then that piles onto one thing. So there is some rules that they've created in simple systems here, and you use the notion of TJ the cars. So let's look at this last clip that we have here, and then let's have a discussion about some implications of this. But let's look at this last clip about the swarm robotics, about how they've programmed this into robots to demonstrate the resilience, the relentlessness, and the ability to program and organize this stuff into self-organizing systems.
No robot knows where they're supposed to be going. No robot is actually talking to another robot. All they're doing is they're measuring roughly where they are relative to other robots. And we've told them to spell grits. So now, each robot knows what an R is supposed to look like. They look around and see, you know what? This looks like a piece of an R. I'm going to go towards this, but I'm going to use this weighted equation to make sure that I did the right thing. And there are three very good reasons why anyone would use grits, right? First is clearly we're in the South, so it makes sense. The other is, as you may have heard, I'm the director of the Georgia Robotics and Intelligent Systems Lab with the acronym GRITS. The third is, when you're spelling something, it's equally hard to do forward and backward in time, so no one can accuse us of cheating, right? And I even have Ted McDonald, a former graduate student in my lab, mess with the robots to show that this is indeed happening in real time. And to me, this is extremely close now to the Swiss challenge that was laid down 10 years ago. And all it is are these cleverly tweaked weights in this kind of swarming control law that we came up with together. It's charming, right? Come on, little robots.
So that begs the question, you remember the recent Olympic ceremony, like the opening ceremony?
Oh yeah, China, Beijing.
The one where they had the drones flying and making kind of the Olympic ring symbols and a whole bunch of different things. I wonder, is it that sophisticated where if one got taken out by like a bird, would they continue the design with another one, or is it very fragile, right?
In 2008, I don't know.
Not the 2008 one. It was recent, like last year. Yeah.
Okay.
2008 was the battle drums declaring war on the world.
Yeah. That was awesome.
So this is a great demonstration where you can see with your own eyes each of the individual nodes or the robots here that form the S.
Right.
That's not the entity. The entity is the group. And when you pull one out, they self-organize into the S without it. And then you add one in, it jumps in and it reforms and respatializes to maintain the S. And when I hold one back, the whole thing moves so that they're included. So it's scalable, it's distributed, and no one of these drones is in charge because you can move them around. So you have to. So when you get right down to it, we can get into the engineering around how they coded an S. How do they know how to do that? That just becomes the math. And then if you watch the rest of this video, and we'll put it in the show notes, these links to these, you can watch the full thing. They do break this down into the advanced math. But then the question really becomes is, what are the applications of this?
Yeah.
Right. So we talk about Black Mirror. You know, we look at these robots. Now, again, I don't like to. The robots are the way for us to look at this and visualize it. But this is more software than it is hardware. But the control systems of the hardware robots are what's driving the stuff. So this company Boston Dynamics worked with Black Mirror, and they made an episode in Black Mirror in season 4 called Metalhead, where this basically dog drone was on a kill mission, and we find out later it's part of a swarm, and when it activates some signal, the swarm comes and converges, and it basically had some kind of kill program on kill all humans, and it was a dystopian view of a swarm protocol here, and it was relentless, just like this is relentless. You take one out. The same thing when we looked at the prior clip, you knock out a couple blocks, it doesn't even know the blocks were there, it just keeps building, it doesn't stop. And it's like, very interesting. There's another Black Mirror episode in season 3 called Hated in the Nation, where they actually use robotic bees.
Newbies,
yeah. And they're addressing some of the collapse of some of the bee colonies to use it for agriculture. But then those robots were hacked in the show.
Spoiler alert.
Well, people need to watch this stuff ahead of time.
Well, you don't believe in spoilers, so I'm just.
People need to watch.
Let's clip that in right before, just very crudely.
We can get a jingle going.
But in that case, there was each one of the ants or the bees in that show. You could get rid of one, you could crush it. But if 100,000 or 500,000 are coming, it just overwhelms you.
Right.
You can't deal with it. I remember I read a book a while ago by Daniel Suarez, who's a good sci-fi writer, called Kill Decision. And in that book, he laid out drones that were becoming more and more advanced and having basically lethal capabilities. And there was one school that was taking the drones to a higher level of sophistication. It was very expensive.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, but
It's a book. I was kidding.
can you spoil a book? I mean, I'm talking about the book.
Yeah.
We need that in like a sound pad just to hit it really quick.
All right. Anyway, so in this book, they make these drones that are very low tech, very similar to ants. They single purpose. They perform a function, but there's tens of thousands of them in a swarm.
Well, it makes sense from an economies of scale standpoint. If it's going to be a physical manifestation of this example, then you want all the variety to be software based. Whereas I'm going to have 2 or 3 physical things you can do, but I'm going to program different patterns in which you go and do that. Versus I'm going to manufacture different things. So they're cheap, and I'm making the same thing every single time.
Well, in this case,
so it's very resilient.
He talked about having $1 million budget, $100. These are $100 bots in some of these clips, and he has 10,000 of them.
Right.
So if 20% fail, I still have a lot, and I can still do a lot of things. Versus a single $1 million robot has a high degree of failure, and then it's out of commission. It can't be used for production.
Right.
And if I have a $1.2 million, I can build 12,000 of them. Not just so. It's almost like building the drone army, and that army is programmed to do whatever you program it to do.
And I think there's more examples of the physical examples of this just because it's easier to grasp for people and they can make the analogies to biology more easily. But there are no issues with production when it comes to the software versions of this, right? So how do you apply swarm intelligence where it's purely software-based, where, I mean, maybe the last mile where I'm getting input from maybe a human, they have to, click to answer a question or whatever, that goes into the algorithm and it's all software-based from there. We're not moving robots around. These are just action potentials or neural networks activating in the back end, whatever black box we defined. That's even more scalable than this.
Yeah.
So how does that apply? I mean, we brought up sports betting before, but will we see consortiums or platforms evolve where people kind of log in and say, hey, I opt in to participate in here. I know that my role may be minimal. I may not have visibility into the broader network and what other people are answering or participating in, but I know that the swarm collective benefit of this could be used to take on an industry. Maybe it's sports betting, maybe it's whatever it is.
Well, so I think, and this is maybe slightly off topic, but I think the interesting thing, so when you were talking just then about the weighting of the individuals that make up the swarm, and almost like what their credentials are, right? Because in the clip that he showed about the Oscar, he was like, these are just movie enthusiasts, they're not experts. But like when you get to a point, so I guess most of my questions are around like, how do you decide who belongs to the swarm? We gave examples before where each one of us knows a varying amount about different topics.
But the thing about this, it's interesting because we're talking about swarm intelligence.
Yeah.
And we keep referencing these animals like, ants, birds, fish. Those animals can't adjust the way they respond to smells or environmental cues themselves. It takes many generations, years and years of evolution. For this, we can use other forms of artificial intelligence like machine learning to bolster and build swarm intelligence itself. So it's kind of, it's like software and software violence. I know it's a term we use every now and then, but it won't be perfect, but the more we use it, the more we can tweak all the different action potentials, all the different weights, the scores.
Well, said another way,
in real time.
We can progress it geometrically.
Yeah, exponentially.
Where this happened very slowly, now we can do it digitally. Because all these examples we use in nature are analog examples. When you go to digital, you do it at machine speed, and then you progress it exponentially. So it's a very different game. And what we're seeing really is this convergence of technology and algorithms, right? So the technology is progressing, and think of the physical robot and software platforms, and then think of the algorithms that make it smart. So everything from machine learning to the application of swarm intelligence. And swarm intelligence, to me, is taking artificial neural networks and deploying them at scale in physical systems. If I were to break it down, that's what I see it being. And this challenges our whole view of what is the individual versus what is the group collective. So when you look at hive mind in terms of the negative connotation, it is loss of individual identity, right? When they make fun of hive minds and people that think alike, they're saying they'll refer to even people in a hive mind as drones. Well, that's an accurate statement. Because
it's scientifically accurate for like wasps and bees. They are drones.
Yeah.
Well, they literally are
called that.
Well, and they're not an individual. No. I mean, the ant colony is the life form, if you look at it this way. The individual ant is not. Now, if I take it one more step, and I think of your biology. Now, again, we've talked about DNA sequencing and stuff like that. Every cell in your body has the same DNA. And that DNA is the software of life, as Ray Kurzweil calls it. And we understand it a little bit. We just recently sequenced it in the last 2 decades. And we're starting to understand it, and we're understanding new aspects of it recently, the CRISPR, and we talked about that in terms of understanding some aspects of what the gene, but we're still at a very fundamental understanding of what it is. What if, and again, I'm speculating, what if behind the scenes, what was part of it, what's really going on is this DNA that sits in all of our cells is the programming that allows our cells to act in a hive mind or swarm intelligence to form a person.
Well, that's what the chromosomes are.
Yeah. So the cells in my foot don't know what the cells in my shoulder are doing, but they work in coordination without knowing what each other is doing to maintain a human function.
So what's the what's the entity? Is it the atom? Is it the cell? Is it the person? Is it the group of people? Is it the planet?
Well, we identify as our people are the individual, and our cells are not.
Right.
So we use dissociative language. We say, my hand, if I lose my hand or I lose my foot, I'm still a person. But when we look at other life forms, we look at an ant, we may have the false paradigm. We may say, look at the ant. I just squashed the ant. I just killed it. No, you didn't. You squashed a cell in an ant colony.
Right.
And if you look at it that way, you see things totally different. And then the issue really becomes when you say, what if people aren't the life form? What if it's something, a higher collective? And this is where you get into the more controversial stuff, because if you were to put swarm intelligence structures around social constructs and the way people work.
And government, maybe.
Well, and this gets...
It's out of alignment with Western values, for sure.
Very much so. Very much so, because...
If it's good for the collective, I mean, it'd be good for the individual, right? Data could be the bane of the individual.
Yeah.
You just said a bunch of dirty words.
Individual.
It's,
Are you a capitalist?
So we don't have this clip, and we're not going to show it, but if you go look on TED, you can see these things. If you just type in some of these terms, you'll find it. But there was a political party in Norway, and actually it's in Sweden, but the talk was given in Norway. And it's a Swedish party called the Pirate Party. And they use basically a lot of swarm AI protocols or swarm intelligence organizational structures to self-organize a political party that doesn't have a leader, but yet they have seats in Parliament, in European Parliament. Pretty interesting, because the individual is not important; it's the collective. Now, this is gonna fly right in the face of Western values as it relates to people. But stepping back from that, we can see the application of this algorithm within the technology sets that we have today to create some very interesting outcomes, and likely being done today without it being widely advertised in the area of high-frequency trading on Wall Street. If I want to predict the future, what better way to go capitalize on that prediction than to trade equities in the stock market?
And to tie it back to the, I know this is going to be in the show title, but the sports betting analogy, there's an admitted aspect of the, if you'd ask the bookies, how they set the lines on certain games, there's pretty much two data models and sets of algorithms they look at. It's not just their predictive models, which is the one that they use to say, like, oh, who do we think is going to win? This guy's the favorite. This team's the favorite by how much? What's, how much have they won before? All those statistics that filter into it. But the second set is, what is the sentiment of the public? Where is the money going? Because there's various reasons here. One of the reasons is minimizing risk on the sportsbooks part. So even if they think, oh, the Patriots are probably favored by 7, they're going to win. But if the Patriots are really favored in terms of public perception, or just there's just a lot of excitement around them, or the other way, if all the money is on one side, they're very exposed, especially for big games like the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So what they try and do is they'll take in those two factors: who they think is going to win, what's the predictive, what did the actual model say, and then what would we have to set it at to get to 50-50,
right.
And then usually the answer is somewhere in the middle. And I don't know if they're using swarm intelligence to inform the latter around like user behavior and what is the active sentiment dynamically, but knowing that if there's a way to tap into one of them, you might be able to have informed input on how they're making their decisions.
So in the bookie business, the betting lines are designed to split the money.
Right.
Half the money on one side, half on the other. And the bookies don't want to get what's called sided. Sided means that they're in a lopsided position, meaning they're betting the over, the under, they're betting on the Patriots or against the Patriots, whatever the issue is. And they don't want to be sided. They want to be in the middle. They want to win all the time, which is to collect their VIG in the middle. And when they get sided, they're essentially they start gambling. And so there's ways that they can mitigate that risk. They can move the lines, but if they move the lines, they get into some of these bear traps for them where they can lose really big.
And I think they move the line slightly if the predictive models are way off, and they think like, I'm going to make a little bit more. But they try of the two, sticks in the ground, they're much closer to the 50-50 stick.
So in football, they can go from 2.5 to 3, but they can't go to 3.5, right? Because if they have some on 2.5 and some at 3.5, it hits at 3, they lose both ways. So in football, there's structural ways where you can't move the line. Same with soccer.
Mm-hmm.
They want to keep the total goal scored at 2.5, but as soon as they go to 3, they lose a lot of business because it's a tie. But if they move to 3.5, they could get at 3, and they just lose both ways.
And the reason they've been so dominant, I mean, they also collect commissions on all these trades too, but I think they're making a lot of the money on just gaming the system that way, is they were the only ones who have access to the data and you could pay for the expensive data scientists and algorithms and all the predictive models. But what we're seeing now is democratization of access to not only the data, but the capabilities to crunch it, to actually analyze it. So what if you had the same tools?
You could play them back at their own game effectively.
What if we could measure the same things that sports books do?
Yeah,
I think there's an opportunity here, and my premise is I believe that this technology will end sports betting as we know it.
Eventually.
It's not there yet right now, but when you look at getting cited, that is analogous to the Oscars example we gave, where you have enthusiasts getting it 40% right. When they vote, they get it 47% right, and that's where the money sits today. It sits in that 47% bucket. But if you could organize the collective information of the people at 40% in a Hive protocol or a Hive algorithm, I can get up to 76%. And then I get on the winning side of the sports books. And there's nothing they can really do about it because they're going to get sided all the time. And if they move the lines too far, they're going to get killed on the math. So I think what's going to happen is you're going to start to see limits on betting. There's already situations like William Hill, the big UK bookie, is here in New Jersey now. They just ban people. There's no right to place a bet. If you win too much, you're out. They just cancel your account, give you your money back. And they'll ban you, just like they banned card counters in blackjack. So these people on the gambling side, they're not stupid. So they're gonna limit this, so you're not gonna be able to make money. Now on Wall Street, that's the ultimate casino. It's lots and lots of money that dwarfs the sports betting. So I think it's probably a better application there about what's happening with sentiment.
So we use high frequency trading quite a lot.
Yeah.
So people in any other industry, when people follow the money and they see, whoa, these guys are making a ton of money because they're using these advanced algorithms.
Yeah.
At what point does it not become a competitive advantage?
It's already there.
So it's already there.
They already eliminated everything else. It was even a battle of speed of light at one point, or how close can you get to the terminals to make the trades. So now it's just the battle of algorithms and how fast you can make them.
There was a time, maybe it's probably some aspect of urban legend, but Goldman Sachs machine trading was making $100 million a day. So
and it's a more efficient version of the sports betting because you make a bet, you have to wait for the game to end.
Right.
You make a bet in the stock market, it's instantly.
Yeah. Bart, can you pull up
tracked.
On Wikipedia the Virtu Holdings? So Virtu Holdings is high frequency trading outfit. Go to the Wikipedia version. And they ultimately went public, and their founder was Vinny Viola, who owns one of the hockey teams. Scroll down to the beginning. They talk to pre-activity. Here it is, trading activities. So look at the third paragraph in trading activity. Stop there. In 2014, when they filed their IPO, they made a profit 1,277 out of 1,220. I'm sorry, 1,277 up days out of 1,278 days. They only had one day out of almost 1,300 trading days where they had a loss. That's
something different.
That's a mistake. Like someone.
That is.
But think about that. Every day they made money. One day they lost money. That's called printing money. And they're using algorithms to do that. And they're going to use algorithms like swarm intelligence to take this to the next level if they're not already using it today.
Yeah.
I'm sure they are.
Right.
Probably. They're not going to advertise it.
That's how you eke out your competitive.
I mean,
advantage.
if there's anything from the 08 financial crisis, the regulators on this and the visibility, transparency here is always behind the capability.
Think of this. So you can just decide for yourself, but so go up to the beginning here, Bart, and just click on this one. Say zoom back out to the full pages there. So the founder is there you go. Hit Vincent Viola, founder. No, the founder right there, Vincent Viola.
I got it.
So he was nominated to be the Secretary of the Army under Trump, and he pulled out because they didn't want to disclose his financial information. But if you look at his net worth, it's like $2.4 billion according to this, assuming this is right. But and you can see he was nominated Secretary of the Army. He pulled out because he didn't want to go through this kind of scrutiny. Like, how'd you make your money? Right. I'm not saying he did anything illegal or even nefarious.
But it's just
he may not
away his cards, right?
He may not just just doesn't want this out there.
Yeah.
Right. And so these guys are printing money. Now what's happened is there's a little bit of a stasis between them because the early movers back, say 6 to 8 years ago were really making a lot of money. And now they're fighting against each other. So it's AI on AI violence, if you will. Right. And there's a little bit of I guess equilibrium, if you will. But these applications are driving into new systems. It could be healthcare. It could be, you've read things about AI predicting the ability to, if you have enough data, they can predict very accurately when you're going to die. So imagine how that affects insurance premiums, retirement planning. Would you want to know? If the AI could get it within 3 months, would you want to know?
I'd want to know where, so I know what to dress.
No, I'm just saying, like these are questions that are right ahead of us, and this topic of swarm AI is one of the algorithms that's joining the convergence of this tech and intelligence that's changing the world around us, and that's why we introduced this topic today on pardon disruption, because this is disruption by its very nature.
Yeah, it's scary. I mean, this could very quickly dive into a dark philosophical discussion, but I think just throwing this out there is it's a lot of food for thought.
It is,
and that's the point.
That is the point. We want people to think about this. We'll put some show notes out there with the links to some of these videos. I watched them over the weekend. It was exciting.
Yeah,
and you won money on the Virginia game.
I did. So I'm trying to use a very crude form of swarm intelligence, just screwing around, and so I buy some sports handicappers' opinions, and I take those opinions and I look for consistencies. So if someone says bet the over, then someone else says bet the under, I just cancel them out and I ignore that game. But if 5 people all say bet the over, I just do.
But again, that's individual voting.
That's Swarm AI, where you're the algorithm, which is not Swarm AI.
Yeah.
No, I'm just taking. I'm.
It's better than what you have now, but it's
you're just informing yourself.
Yeah, and also I read their rationale for why they pick certain things, and I'm just using. I use the term very crude. It is extremely crude, and I'm just seeing what's going to happen. I'm going to see if I can.
So we'll have to revisit and see what your book looks like at the end of the.
Well, I started with 500, and it's up to about 2,500. So it's I've done this before, and I got it up to say 10,000, and I went to 0. So I know I lack the discipline to adhere to it.
You're not using like Vinny Viola's algorithm, right? Can you buy those?
I have no intention of making any money on this. It's just a thought experiment. It's entertainment. It's
what
fun.
time's your flight to Monaco?
But I do think that there's an opportunity, if you had discipline, to create a sports betting ETF. And
right.
Because you don't want to be invested in the games.
That'll get crushed immediately.
Well, they won't let you place the bet.
Well, I mean, like whoever is, this big sports book, whoever that is, will line the pockets of the regulators and like, we're shutting that down.
Yeah.
There's too many.
So it'd have to be a
concerns there.
private ETF. Right?
Yeah, on the dark web.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I hope this is an interesting topic to you guys. It is to me.
Super interesting.
It is also an interesting convergence of the analog biology with the field of computer science in ways that we maybe not thought about.
Yeah.
And anyway, so hope you guys liked it.
Good stuff.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening to Pardon the Disruption. We'd like you to subscribe to our podcast if you like it. You can find us on most of the platforms where you get your podcast from, whether that be iTunes or YouTube or whatever you're on. We also want some feedback. What shows do you want us to cover? What do you like? What do you not like? So that we can do this. We're doing this for you. We're not doing this for anything else. So please subscribe and give us some feedback. Thank you very much.